please feel free to sit. All right, once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. And I kindly request all of our delegates to please settle down, and we're just beginning this session. Well, a very warm welcome once again to this this session, the Revalue, Redesign, Regenerate, the Circular Economy Pathways. And this session will explore how stakeholders can accelerate the transition to a circular economy, and a distinguished panel will be deliberating on supporting policies, strategies, innovation, and technologies that are enabling industries to improve and the source efficiency and to accelerating the whole circular economy transition. Well, it gives me a great pleasure to invite and welcome our esteemed panelists, Mr. Joe Phelan, Mr. Amit Verma, Mr. Narayan Devanathan, Mr. Rajgopalan Manohar, and Dr. Anantaraman Subramaniam to the dais. Thank you. Now I request our session chair and moderator, Mr. Joe Phelan, Executive Director, Asia Pacific for World Business Council for Sustainable Development, to kindly lead this important discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Joe Phelan. There's a lot of misters on this stage. A big thanks to Mus Nandini for putting together this agenda. And we'll do our best as an unbalanced panel to have a good discussion over the next hour. The theme of this conversation is around circularity, and I think we've all heard the data around the size of the market value in the circular economy and the potential of the circular economy, but also the not relatively, but the factually, substantially low rates of circularity that there are currently. And while we heard from Minister Yadav this morning about the introduction of the extended producer responsibility, and we know about the great innovations and engineering of linking slag and the aluminium industry with cement and so on, all these things that are going on, we also know that our economies all around the world are far from circular. We understand that having a circular economy is critical to resource security, which is a priority not only in India but around the world. And is central to meeting the climate action that we need. 55% of GHGs come from resource use. Also to protecting nature. And I think that too often when we look at nature and we think about nature and finance for nature, we think about trees and carbon offsets, when actually we should be thinking about circular economy. And also is essential to protecting and enhancing livelihoods and well-being. Again, in a country like India, which is has a lot more available in terms of human resource than it does in terms of land space. So that waste management side is critical. So central to resource security, absolutely essential to meeting the climate, nature, and equity actions that we recognise we will need, while retaining more of the value from the products and services that you produce. Businesses have got a critical role in this as the drivers of the transition, but again, we recognise that it's a multi-stakeholder approach. Today, we're going to focus on some enablers. It's clear we're not transitioning fast enough, so we've got a really good panel where we can hear some different approaches and discuss some different enablers. And we're also going to have some remarks and hear the views of the current plan from Niti Aayog, which is going to be really important. I just want to share, on behalf of my organisation, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We're a 20-year partner of the CII-ITC Centre. We're a global community of companies who work together to make sustainability performance a key driver of competitiveness. And a lot of the work that we do is around aligning, or is about bringing transparency for better decision-making and aligning incentives. And the most sort of famous contribution to that, which is very old now, is that we co-created something called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol with WRI. Our members were the business user group. Before that, there was no common way for companies to measure and compare their carbon performance. The world's moved on a lot, and carbon accounting has too, but we're currently at the late stage of developing a global circularity protocol. And this will build on some indicators called the circular transition indicators, which is a tool that companies can use to identify the circularity of products, assets currently, and identify value-creating opportunities to improve that. And the goal for this Global Circularity Protocol, which is being developed with UNEP and a community of over 100 scientists and businesses and academic organizations, is to create alignment and consistency for countries, policymakers, and businesses to measure and communicate the circularity of products across value chains, with the idea that then policies can be set to support greater action, finance can flow to greater circularity, and so on. And we'll be launching that at the COP next month. Okay, if you want to know more about that, please come and see me. But with that, it's my pleasure to invite the director from Niti Aayog. Please, sir, if you could set the scene for what the country's plan is on circularity and how that's going to take shape going forward.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Joe, for giving me this opportunity, and CII for inviting me here. I think it's a very timely call for an organization like Niti Aayog to discuss of what we are thinking about. It's a very important topic, reimagining sustainability in terms of both resilience, regeneration, and responsibility. So when we talk about resilience, there's an angle of climate which comes into mind immediately about climate resilience, and that is the context which we talk about most of the time. And of late, we have been, for probably I would say last couple of decades, a large focus has been only on mitigation, and our resilience was largely thinking about having more solar panels, having more windmills to generate electricity, kind of reduce the emissions from power generation and shift to technologies which are very industry-oriented. But we have seen over a period of time how impacts of climate have started becoming a reality now. I mean, I'm talking about when we were still talking about climate change, how important it is and how it is going to affect us in future. But now we are seeing it every time. We are seeing what is happening in India, in Himachal, in Uttarakhand, all the landslides which we are having. So the focus has now shifted quite rightly from mitigation-oriented things to adaptation-oriented activities. And Niti Aayog itself has been leading one of the important studies of net zero transition of our economy at 2070 and what each of the sectors would look like. And while we were doing that, we realized that adaptation is something which we also need to focus on, because you cannot have an understanding of what the climate finance is required and what kind of investments we need to make our economy resilient. So that's part of the climate, but all that climate resilience happens largely because of our own consumptive uses, and that consumptive use can go down only when we are talking about reuse and circularity, and that's where the topic of today's conversation becomes very, very important. Another point which you mentioned is about regenerative aspect of sustainability. And myself being a forest officer, and as Joe also mentioned, that when we talk about nature, we think about trees and forests, and coming from forest service, I mean, that naturally comes to me, excuse me for that, but I mean, it's an important part of regeneration, and much of the resource which we use is actually coming at the expense of forests. So much of the mining areas, so even if you are able to keep your forest areas intact, and look at the resource use and are able to reduce that because of your circularity, I think it's an important aspect to look at. When we talk about responsibility, I think that's where our citizens-centric approach should be very, very important. At the end of the day, we are all global citizens. We may be playing different roles in our professional life, but as a consumptive human being, we are all playing that similar role of consumption, and that's where I think a lot of responsibility lies. In the positions we are in, I think all people in this room would be in some way or the other at a position of power to influence the policy and of an organization, of government, or somebody else. to make our policies more responsible as far as sustainability is concerned. So I think the whole topic kind of captures much of the gamuts which we want to look at as far as circularity is concerned. Coming to circularity, again, you've settled it into three more parts of revalue, redesign, and again regenerate. I think revalue is very important. So one of the important parts which Niti Aayog has been doing in as far as circularity is concerned is looking at various sectors. We started with looking at 11 sectors in 21. There's a large list of that. I don't need to repeat that. But the one common underlying theme is where is the value of that waste? Why is that waste recycling not happening? What are things which get recycled very well? Probably metals, aluminum cans, electronic waste. They are valuable, they get recycled. Some things like plastics, probably it's very difficult to recycle because there is no value. So one common theme which we have always struggled with is of all the call for waste to wealth, which we talk about, where is that conversion happening and how we can make it happen. So at the end of the day, what is the money available on the table for a recycler to get the waste and convert it into something useful? I think that's very important. So that value creation is something which we focus on. There are multiple ways to do it. One of the ways is definitely the extended responsibility, EPR system or extended producer responsibility system, which India very uniquely came out with in terms of creating a viability gap funding or financing mechanism for recyclers to fund the reverse logistics as well as the processes, which otherwise are not viable. So industry, the producing industry in some way contributes to buying of the EPR certificates, and it's a market-driven mechanism which is helping many recyclers now in different waste streams to come out with solutions where they can get some value out of it. Redesign is again a very important thing. I was just talking to Ms. Nandini and about the way we can look at the materials themselves. The design is also an important part. You can always design for circularity, but I think the conversation has now gone ahead in terms of selection of materials themselves. For example, can we have sugarcane waste-based plastic plates replacing the plastic plates? Can we have designs of furniture which doesn't have unnecessary platings which make it very, very difficult to recycle those materials? I think those aspects, the design aspects, have to be looked at. Regenerate part I already talked about earlier. So as Mr. Joe had also mentioned that probably there had been a conversation already on the global stats of how less we recycle and how large the waste producers we are globally. I won't go into the stats again, but I think it's important to emphasize that in India probably collection may be a problem, but much of the Western world where the collection is very high, much of the waste still does not get recycled. So much of that is shipped to some obscure corner of the earth only to be dumped in the oceans or not to be recycled in a proper environmental fashion. So there lies the importance of all the technology, the redesign, and the value which we can create. In Niti, currently we are, I'm sure Niti everybody would know, but just a small introduction to Niti. It's National Institute for Transforming India, the erstwhile Planning Commission, and we are the official think tank of the government, and we work on policies. So Niti's role has, as I mentioned earlier, about the 11 sectors which we had created the circular economy roadmap for the country. But currently, last year we decided to look at 5 more sectors in much greater detail: the end-of-life vehicles, tires, e-waste, lithium-ion batteries, and scrap metal. So we formed working groups. Many of the industry partners were there. Some of them are part of the audience here as well. The focus again was, as I said, about the value. Where is the money on the table? How do we make the viability work? Since India's recycling is largely driven by informal sectors, there are many issues with informal recycling. First of all, the most important of it is the informal players not following the environmental norms, and the recycling happens in a very environmentally degrading manner. In fact, today itself, I got an Insta post from somebody telling how UK tires are reaching India and getting burned to create pyrolysis oil, and it's all polluting. So there are challenges when we look at the industry within India, and this is what we have tried to address. In terms of laws, I think we are great, doing great. We have very good policies, laws, all frameworks are there. But the enforcement of those laws and the compliance part of it is something which I personally feel we need to focus on. And while dealing with all these sectors, we also realize that there are a lot of horizontal issues, the cross-cutting issues across the sectors, issues related to GST. And our Honorable Prime Minister has already announced about revision of GST slabs. And I think it's a great opportunity for industry also to represent to the GST Council on how they look at the new brackets and how the waste industry can actually benefit from their, I mean, there's been a long-standing demand of 5% GST for all the waste materials. I think that's going to be a game changer because the compliance part becomes much easier with that. There are also cross-cutting issues within EPR itself because EPR, although conceptually same, but for each of the sector, it is applied a bit differently. And it works well in some and doesn't so well in others. So we are having a relook at that as well on how can we make a EPR system which is much more effective and is conducive to both the industry and the recyclers. The finance part is again something which is very important and usually not discussed as much for recyclers as it should be. So when we talk about climate finance, I think it never ever gets trickled down to the circularity part of it, and which is something which we have now started focusing on. As many of you would be aware, in the current visit to Japan, our Honorable Prime Minister has already signed an agreement with Japan on a shared carbon market. And the NDA, the National Designated Authority order has also come out very recently by MOEFCC. And waste streams are a recognized part of the carbon market which are coming up in India. And we, in NITI also, we are coming up with certain sector, the methodology, the detailed methodology on how the carbon trading is going to happen for certain sectors. And the starting point has been the end-of-life vehicles. And very soon we hope to have a dedicated methodology on trading carbon credits for recycling an old vehicle. And similarly, we'll go on to other streams as well. So I think that will also create a certain amount of value for the recyclers to bridge that formal-informal gap which is currently there. And so finance, we already have certain finances like NABARD, SIDBI, who are actually funding certain things for recyclers. There is also MSME, Ministry of MSME, which has certain schemes like SPICE to support the recyclers who can bring in circularity in many of the things. And one of the important thing which I want to bring out here before I stop this address is about the key partners which we have. So while on the government side, we already have ministries which we work closely with, but I think the role of the industry organizations like CII and FICCI, who have opened a joint collaborative RECIC also, is about see, the challenge in policy making is that we can only set a bar. And that bar actually from our perspective is just the passing marks, right? I mean, it's like 33% out of 100. But most of the industry actually thinks it's the only bar we need to cross and we really don't need to go to 100%. Much of the people who lead the industry have been toppers in their own times. And I would expect that you can leap much higher than the bar which is set by the law. So the challenge for the industry and the motivation which is there is that since government is constrained to set the bar too high, I think it's for the industry to raise the bar very high and take the challenge forward and help address these challenges which we are facing. So with that, I would stop here and I look forward to the discussion which is going to happen. I think it's going to be very valuable for me with such a decorated panel here. I think there'll be many things for me to learn as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit Ji. Amazing. Already, there's the stick of the EPR, but these incentives with a preferential GST rate, and then waste streams being linked into the carbon market. So you know, like a holistic approach to incentives there. Could you share with us from your experience of working on developing these roadmaps at NITI Aayog? Sectorally, any lessons that you found from working with any particular sectors over the last few years?
Yeah, so I think I can share with you certain insights on the end-of-life vehicles. I think I've worked on that for quite some time, and it's an area which touches everyone. Everybody here probably in this room would have a vehicle, have ownership of a vehicle. And so when we, so there was recently there was announcement by the government that we are going to ban vehicles which are 15 years of age, and people who are in Delhi and who are at the receiving end of the pollution, much of those people thought that, see, my vehicle is 15 years old, but I have maintained it so well, and it is non-polluting and it is great, and I don't need to recycle it at all. And so there is an unwillingness of the customer to sell the vehicle out of the system, and the recyclers can only offer so much because the value which they can generate out of the waste is limited. So that economics which should match for this sustainable system to work, it makes it very difficult. So there is certain willingness from people, and it's the same problem we see in e-waste also. People, usually including me, hoard a lot of old phones, laptops in home, will not just throw it away. And there is tons of materials lying in our houses which we are just not ready to part with. So either we are emotionally attached to our things and we don't let them reach the circular economy, the downstream circular economy of it, which makes it very, very difficult for us to recover the material. Or we just think it is of no value at all, and we would just throw it in a stream where it becomes very, very difficult to segregate it. So that's one part of the consumer behavior. On the other side, I think the industry is already it's a challenge, as I said earlier. The formal informal debate is very, very strong in India. There is a huge set of people who are dependent on that, and for them to be able to upgrade their systems, I think that's very important, because we can't just say that we are going to build large automated factories and put all those people out of the job. When we talk about climate resilience, we always talk about just transition. And as part of that just transition, it's important to carry everybody along. Either we reskill them and make them at par with industry, or provide them finance, and which is also our focus on through SIDBI or other organizations, NABARD or MSME, that we are able to provide them finance to upgrade their systems a bit so that they are environmentally compliant, probably create facilities which are common. For example, in vehicles, we can create common depollution areas from which all people can benefit. I mean, they can get the vehicles depolluted and then process them in their own small yards. That is another possibility we can look at. So for each of the sectors, I think that is what we need to do. Look at the smaller players, upgrade them to a certain level, probably fit them in certain part of the value chain, if not all, and then take them along as far as recycling journey is concerned. Yeah.
Thank you. And how are larger companies part of that, equipping MSMEs, working with the informal sector? Do larger companies have a role in that, or are there any sectors where you'd like to see larger companies being, as part of the ecosystem, stepping up and helping to enable that?
So larger companies definitely have a role. I think when we talk about the redesign part of it, if there is a intent by the companies to use the materials which have been recycled. I mean, if the company mandates in their own policies that we are going to have certain X percentage of material which is coming out from recycling, I think that's going to be extremely helpful to the recyclers, much more than the EPR system itself. Because then that ensures a very steady supply of raw materials which is coming out from those small units into a manufacturing ecosystem. In India right now, for certain things, for e-waste, probably we don't have much manufacturing in electronics. But for cars, if we can mandate some steel to go into car manufacturing, I think that will be great. Yeah.
Great. I'd like to ask all of you a favor, which is to participate in an audience exercise. So all of you who represent a company, who work for a company, if you could put your hand up. I promise no one will be embarrassed. If you're with a company, hello, Saini. Okay, how many of you have targets for circular content upstream, to source circular content upstream? How many of you have targets upstream, yeah, to source, so in the way that Amir was talking about? Great. And how many of you have targets downstream in terms of waste management or EPR, reclaiming products? How many of you do? Some of you have both. Okay. So then for our audience, some good business representation, some maybe, I want to say a third maybe, being generous, have targets to source circular content upstream, and maybe a quarter have responsibility targets for what happens downstream. So with that, what I want to do is ask our other three panelists to share some perspectives on new approaches that can help all of us to unlock circularity faster. And we're going to start with Rajagopal with Novonesis. Excuse me for my... because I mentioned at the start about the link between circularity and nature. We heard about the direct link between circularity and climate. You're actually flipping this around and you've got biology at the center of approaches to circularity rather than industrial processes. Tell us what you're doing with biology and the circular economy.
Thanks, Joe. And also thanks to the organizers for giving me this opportunity. Actually, Novonesis is a relatively new company, just over a year old, but it has a very rich legacy. It's actually come from the merger of two leading biotech companies. One is Novozymes, which was the leading enzyme manufacturer, and Christian Hansen, which was more into the biological space. And we have more than 100 years of legacy in terms of bringing biosolutions to solve some of the big sustainability and circularity challenges that is facing the globe. And we do that using some of the nature's tools that has been given to us, which could start with a small protein like enzymes, could be a bacteria, it could be a probiotic, it could be a prebiotic, it could be some nature-derived ingredient that is helping transform some of the industries. And while we have this rich 100-year legacy, we have this motto saying that we have just scratched the surface of what biosolutions can unlock. Just to give a kind of a small example of how our company and our products kind of transform is, I guess all of you would have heard about the ethanol blending success story that India has been driving in the world. Recently in the last 5 years, especially when things have really taken off, that is enabled in terms of transforming some of the grains and sugars and even things like rice straw and bamboo into ethanol is enabled by using some of the nature-driven biosolutions, like enzymes. That is what is driving. And the important thing over here is to, yes, there are a lot of tools in the nature. In fact, nature has these big cell factories all around. That's what makes this world work. There are a lot of tools that we can apply into large industrial processes to make the processes more sustainable. But we need to think about how do we reduce some of the conventional processes, or how do we replace, totally replace, or how do we kind of transform the existing processes and do things in a totally different manner at scale. And that is where the challenges is. How do we do it at a very economic manner, and how do we do it at a large scale? And that's where I see that all stakeholders, including the policymakers, industry, and consumers, coming together and driving this change would help in a lot of way. It could be in the form of mandates, it could be in terms of pricing the carbon-intensive, the polluting industries, or it could be in terms of innovation and R&D that picks up a problem and then tries to arrive at a solution. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Could you share with us some applications of biology, whether it's for the energy sector, you mentioned ethanol, or for agriculture, seafood processing, plastics? What are the applications that might be there to help drive India's transition to a more circular economy?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I can give endless number of applications, but I will limit myself to a few big ones which are relevant for this panel and topic today. One is in terms of how do we decarbonize our economy, be it in terms of transportation, be it in terms of petrol, be it in terms of diesel production, be it in terms of biogas production. So it is using some of the solutions that we have. It helps converting the biomass into valuable energy-related products. It converts either the waste streams or valuable biomass into high-value products. That is one of the major applications. And like I mentioned, ethanol is a success story, and we are all looking forward for the pick of the roadmap for biogas and hopefully biodiesel as well. The second one that I would like to kind of mention is how do we do more with less? For example, if we want to use biofuels or some of the other bio ingredients at scale, then agriculture becomes the source and provider. And India being an agriculture economy, then how do we improve the productivity of agriculture? How do we get more from less, from the same land, from the same amount of water? How do we get more agriculture productivity? And that is where some of the biofertilizers, biostimulants, biopesticides, these are some of the many solutions that can really make a big difference. We don't have to go through the same polluting industries that has been done in other regions where the productivity has gone up. We can look at biosolutions to improve the farm productivity, and in that process, achieve the government's target. The government has a very ambitious target of decarbonizing by 2070, and even more important than that, we talked about the people. We want to be a developed nation by 2047. So if we want to achieve that, there is no way we can achieve that without lifting the farmers up. So how do we use some of the biosolutions to improve the agriculture productivity? That is a very key area where we need to see and drive. That's where a lot of biological applications come. Then many of you attended the Minister Piyush Goyal's talk on circularity, where he mentioned if every Indian consumes 1 kg less of food waste, right? So how do we extend the shelf life of milk? How do we extend the shelf life of milk without the cold storage that is required? How do we extend the shelf life of bread so that instead of 4 days, if it can last for 7 days or 8 days? Imagine how much wastage can be reduced. That is where some of the nature's tools will help us in terms of extending the shelf life and reducing the food waste. This is also part of the circularity and bio. Instead of things getting into the waste, it can be done. Another area which I would like to kind of mention, which is a big problem for India, is the bioplastics. So it could be both in terms of how do we recycle the plastics, but also how do we look at biological sources to replace the petrochemical derived plastics. So now a lot of the sugar industry is going into the bioplastics route, PLA production and things like that. How do we encourage more such transformative approaches where we can totally replace, and if not, at least recycle in a more effective manner? So these are some of the major applications that support the circularity vision and net zero emissions, but also it can help us in achieving the nation's development targets.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Narayan, you're with Dentsu, the Global Communications Agency. We were hearing there about enabling consumers to consume 1 kg less food waste. How do we make this connection between behavior change, consumer action, and while not losing sight of the systems change that we need to create? So it's not about putting responsibility onto consumers, but how do we connect consumers and their behavior patterns with operations and the transformations that we need to go on? Big one.
Thank you, Joe. You've answered half the question, actually. The building blocks of the answer are right there. But thank you for the question, and thank you for already being educated by the panelists while I've been listening and sitting here. So at Dentsu, we have a small unit called Dentsu Good, which is a social impact consulting unit, and our core proposition is to say we can help you create growth from good. So there's an inherent value exchange that we built into that proposition. And it comes from unlocking what I might call a behavior change value chain. Bear with me for a couple of things over here. So the value chain actually goes across these 4 building blocks of awareness, intent, action, and impact. And there's usually a gap between each of these 4 components. Okay? Let me try and do a clumsy experiment to demonstrate it. Those who are from CII, you will not participate in this little experiment. For the rest of you, without looking down and without touching it, can you tell me what material your lanyard is made of and your name tag is made of? With no looking down, no touching. Okay. And what's the name tag made of? Paper. And when was the last time you attended a conference where the tag was made of, the lanyard was made of cotton and the tag was made of paper? Are you from CII? Okay, you're not. You're an exception also then. Right? Now, just think about it. We all attended countless conferences, and typically those are made of plastic. What happens to those plastic? We've not even stopped to think about it, right? Forget how we've disposed of it. The other thing that I was going to say was last year, when I started getting invited to speak on panels, I had put down a condition that I would not participate in a panel if it was going to be all men. And here I am sitting on a panel with all men, right? So I had the intent, but I have not followed through with the action, right? And we know what impact that might have. So couple of little clumsy examples to show how when there are breakdowns in that value chain from awareness to intent to action to impact, things don't quite go according to whatever plan we may have in mind. And so to bring that back to Joe's question, what will it take in order to connect all of these dots and create actions and impact that actually perpetuate the circularity? I want to talk in terms of interlinkages or intersectionalities across three key factors, what I call the who, the what, and the how. So the who is in terms of all of the stakeholders that are involved in enabling a circular economy or circularity of any sector, right? And typically we either think of the producers, so some of us in the room are that, or the consumers. But beyond these two, there are a myriad other stakeholders, for example, the government, the policymakers, and then the other partners, the other parts of the supply chain. Typically, we think in our own silos, and we don't connect the dots. We don't link each of these pieces at all times. I mean, we have enough on our hands just to do what we need to do for ourselves. So, but how do we make sure we connect the dots between each other also? But if we don't do that, then we're not going to succeed together. We'll fail individually also. So that's the who. The what of it actually is to do with, again, some things that we're familiar with. This is the intersection between culture, technology, and economy. Amit here has spoken about the impact of economy. Rajgopal already threw light on how technology can enable it. But at the end of the day, again, not to make it sound like this is the single most important thing, if we don't perceive cultural value in an action or in the consumption or production of something, then we will not change the behavior that is needed at the end of it. Let me go back to an example. I was just scanning the room over here, and then thankfully I don't see any Gen Z here. So I dare say everybody here has participated in this action that I'm about to talk about. We all probably either ourselves or have seen our parents use newspaper specifically in different ways, right? So we would never throw the newspaper away after we've read it. Right? We'd either turn it into packaging or we would go and sell it on the street corner, and that would come back to us as the paper in which grapes or oranges would be wrapped, and we'd use it again until it literally got shredded, right? Now, there's an economic incentive there, right? So resource was scarce, whether it's the paper we're talking about or financial resources. So we perforce recycled, and we were part of a circular economy. You ask younger people who are used to abundance to do the same thing, and especially in a cultural context where we are all tasting aspiration and the fruits of meeting those aspirations for the first time, and have the means to meet those aspirations for the first time, and you're like, why? I don't want to do this. There is no cultural incentive for this. And so, in a way, it seems very shallow, but if we can make it cool, that's one reason why they will adopt this behavior. Right? So the importance of cultural value, when dovetailed with the technological innovation and the economic incentive, are what can bring about the behavior change that's needed. So that's the what and the how, the who, the who and the what. And then it comes to the how. This is actually probably the most codified in terms of the how. There are these three building blocks that have always been around in terms of enabling behavior change at a sociological scale, which is education, policy, and persuasion. And as one of my oldest and favorite memes goes, There's a sign of a seagull sitting on a sign that says no seagulls. Okay, we are that seagull, right? If you just provide us information, we will be like, who are you to give me that information? Why should I listen to you? Right? So education is important, but is insufficient. Policy is necessary, and we've all seen the positive effects of, for example, the ban on single-use plastic bags, but it has only gotten us so far. Persuasion goes back against to behavior change. And so either the cultural or the technological or the economic incentive must enable us to bridge those gaps between awareness, intent, action, and impact. If we do that across all stakeholders, then we hopefully are on our way to circularity.
Thank you. You shared a concept with me before this panel started where you talked about value exchange. Can you tell me what you meant by that, please, and the audience what you meant by that?
Yeah, actually, before this session started, I also asked permission from Nandini if I could say something a little provocative over here, but I'm actually going to invert it on its head. So there's this Indian-American author called Anand Giridhar Das. I don't know if you've heard of him or read him. And he wrote this book in which he makes this very telling, provocative analogy of saying, asking industry to solve the world's sustainability problems is like calling an arsonist to put out fire because he's familiar with fire. I think it's a little uncharitable, and I'll give you a second example of why I say this. So one of Dentsu's 3 sustainable development goals is actually to enable responsible consumption and production. Now, as a company that's their job is to get more people to buy more stuff that they probably don't need, it seems a little ironical, and we are like that arsonist, right? But I also firmly believe it's people like us on the inside who can best create change than just moralizing from the outside. And so I like what Anand Giridhar Das writes, but I think he's being a little uncharitable. And because we know what kind of value we create from industry, and because we know what kind of value people or other people in the value chain seek, we can create a mutually beneficial value exchange. Typically, as industry, we probably want downstream behavior change. We want consumers to be more responsible in how they consume and how they recycle and how they are becoming a part of the circular economy. And they probably look to us and say, why are you producing this kind of plastic-based material if you want us to change? Don't give us the option in the first place. But if we are able to see each other's perspective and provide each other more mutually beneficial value, that's what I meant by value exchange, right? So we're seeing more than anecdotal evidence that Gen Z prefers brands that are ethical, that care about the planet, that care about a more equitable world. That's great, but what are they giving us in return? Right? And maybe we need to question them as well. And of course, we're getting their money, we're getting their custom. But is there a way for us to turn that into additional value on both sides?
Thank you. For those of you that are interested in how to connect more sustainable products to consumers, there's a piece of work called the Good Life 2.0 and the Good Life 2.0 playbook, which was to look at, we all understand what the good life is, 2 cars, 2 holidays, bigger, faster, the American dream. And the Good Life 2.0 is that we all want things like this that are not sustainable, but we all have desires and aspirations that are sustainable. And marketeers can choose to which they play to and which you play to. And the Good Life 2.0 playbook sets out a process for identifying sustainability aspirations of consumers. In fact, it does it with a US cohort. It hasn't been done for India, but some of the work of Dentsu actually could be used to apply it. And then it shows how you can use those insights to connect sustainable products and services with consumer wants and needs through a storybook. So if you're interested in that, I'd look at the work of Dentsu to understand how consumers think about these subjects across India and the region, and look at the Good Life 2.0 playbook.
Thank you for that shout out, Joe.
Okay. Okay. Shubhu, we're talking about the connect to consumers. I was reading there's been a bit of pushback on some of the biodiesel getting mixed in. Sometimes there's a perception that circular products, you're compromising on competitiveness or quality or hygiene. How do you navigate building circularity into product design without compromising on competitiveness?
Can I stand on the podium and speak, because this part of the audience I'm not able to?
Yeah, good idea.
So thank you, Joe. On a very different note, maybe like an out of syllabus from his questions. For the last 10 years, I've been collecting all these lanyards and the badges of any conference that I attended. So I have this bunch of them. I never realized the value of it until I heard Narayan. Frankly, I don't know how to dispose it, and I want to do it in the right way. So I'm happy that I have not adopted a behavior that would have incurred your wrath today. So I represent Siemens. So we are a global technology company. How many of you have heard Siemens? Thank you, grateful. So our purpose is to create technology with a purpose, right? And that's our purpose, and we serve infrastructure, industries, and also transportation. And our goal is very simple: to drive growth in a sustainable manner. Now, apparently what Joe, you said that there is apparently a conflict and paradox, but I just wanted to start to say that why this is, why designing a product in a material efficient way is super critical. We have seen from our studies that over the last 50 years, the amount of resources that we as a humanity consume has gone up 4 times. And I don't think the planet Earth has enhanced its generation capacity by 4 times. Certainly not. In fact, it has deteriorated, and that's the reason our global overshoot day has already happened on 24th of July, I read in 2025. Now, when you create a product, and there is a conflict, if you create a product that is modular, then it is very useful from the point of view of replacement and recycling. But creating modularity means creating more materials, right? And this is an inherent conflict, and he is spot on. But how do we solve this problem? The only way you can solve these kinds of apparent paradox, especially in the space of sustainability, is using digital technologies, right? Because the digital technology, we have seen from our experiences that it can achieve a certain goal without needing to take much trade-off with the other, because exactly with the level of data and with the power of software and computing, it is possible to optimize practically endlessly. So let me give you a couple of examples. We have a customer, is a global customer who makes robos. Robos are essentially a modular product. Now what happens is that these robo arms are quite heavy, right? And heaviness means the robo will have to consume more energy. And of course, to produce these arms, then you require more materials. And how do we solve this problem? There are 2 ways, there are 2 things we could do, and we did that. One is we use what is called as a digital twin. And what is a digital twin? And digital twin is just a physics-based model of either a component or a system or a process. And the idea, the benefit you get is, in the virtual world, you can exactly see the replica, a workable, a physics-based model replica of the real world, in this case, a robo arm, and you can simulate a lot of what-if scenarios. And what we found is that the robo arm is how you see it, because if it was designed in any other way, it couldn't have been manufactured, right? And the manufacturability became a constraint. And then there is a technology called as additive manufacturing, which is the reverse of the manufacturing the way it is conventionally done, which is depletive manufacturing, which means you take, it's like a sculpting, you take a big block and then you chip off what you don't require until you get the parts that you want. And this is wasting a lot of resources. Whereas additive manufacturing, you start printing only those, let's say, spots of the parts that you require, and therefore you don't waste material. And what we found by blending this digital technology, the digital twin and this additive manufacturing, we saved about 60% of the material that is used for the robo arm. And naturally, it has a concomitant effect on emissions. When you use less material, then certainly, of course, you also reduce your emissions. In fact, circularity is one of our biggest levers to decarbonize, because the less material you use, we have seen that up to 30% of emissions can be reduced. And a second lever, design lever that we can use is material substitution. So it is not necessary that you have to always get rid of material, but you can use the same amount of material but a different kind. And I'll give you an example. So we are also our market leader in the space of power distribution. We make distribution gear for utilities and industries going up to the high voltages. Now, up to the medium voltage, we have been using a gas called as an SF6 gas, which makes the gear extremely compact. But out of our own research, what we found is that this could easily be replaced by what is called as a clean air. And what we have achieved is that 1 kg of SF6 gas, it creates an equivalent of 25,000 kg of carbon dioxide emissions, and that is saved completely. So we have achieved materiality by just material substitution. And of course, you also have a possibility, if you are a metal consumer, you also have a possibility to replace it by green metal. In the case of stainless steel, it was possible in our Frankfurt factory that we reduced about 93% carbon, and also the material got a little lighter. So what I want to say in summary is that it is possible to not worry too much about this trade-off, that you can reduce material usages, which of course in turn reduces the cost and not increase the cost, while at the same time you're able to advance the circularity goals with the help of digital technology.
Thank you, Shubhu. And if you want to stay there, because I've got a follow-up question for you.
Yeah, okay.
You're bringing a lot of transparency through your digital twins into process flow, optimization, and design. We talked a bit about the importance of upstream and downstream. Have you done any work to measure the circular content for companies upstream or downstream, and even maybe exchange any of that data across suppliers?
It is still work in progress, frankly speaking, because in an engineering industry, managing or reducing the upstream and downstream, which is scope 3 emissions as we call, is one of the toughest tasks. And the scope 3 emissions is roughly anything between 25 to 1,000 times. Not with Siemens, but typically, I'm just giving a range. What we have seen is that any efficiency lever that targets the hardware, which is the physical material that is already bottomed out, maxed out, nearly every organization has achieved what they could achieve. And then the next layer, which makes the hardware efficient, which is the automation layer, and here again the technology has literally maxed out. But then what is possible is the digitalization layer, which I spoke in my former statements with you, that this layer can create a lot of difference. The reason is very simple. An install base, practically an industrial install base practically generates tons and tons of data on a real-time basis. And this data does not generate value without the intervention of digital technology. Therefore, the moment you add a digital layer, suddenly you will find the value increases. So the first step that we have been trying to do is a foundational step that is bringing the transparency of our supply chain. So we have a technology called as a C-Green, which is a blockchain-based technology. So what it does is it's able to map what is called as a product carbon footprint, which means where are the carbon footprints lying in my supply chain? Where are the hotspots and where are the low mango opportunities that I can go and attack? So we are encouraging every of our supplier to come onto this platform so that there is a win-win process with both of us. The second is again a little going out of the syllabus, but it's super important, is that when you look at the total linear system, the manufacturing process in the conventional linear model, you take, then you make and you dispose. And how do you convert this into a regenerate model? You do it by closing the loop. And you can close the loop in multiple ways. Number one is you take the product before it is disposed and then find another market that it can reuse, that's reuse. Or you can repair the product, as some of the panelists have spoken in the past before. Or you can refurbish or recycle the product back into the process such that max value of your raw material, it stays within the value chain, right? This is what you do. But what we have found in the engineering industry is that this loop closing is many a times not possible within your own industry value chain. And therefore, we have to find a way to close this loop with some other industrial value chain. And I'll give you an example. Siemens makes what is called as MCBs, which you find in your distribution board in your respective apartments. And they are made of, the body of it is made of thermoplastics. And these thermoplastics, the process generates quite a bit of a waste. And what do we do with this waste? And this waste is of no use to us, and we can't close this loop. But this waste is of value for a cement industry, what we discovered. So we partnered with the cement industry, and they are too happy to buy this waste because this is valorizing waste for them. And they took this thermoplastic, they ground it, and then they made it into cement, and then it's a blended cement that they are able to market. So it is possible to close the loop if your circularity is broadened beyond your industrial value chain. That's one point I want to bring in. Especially when you have to close the downstream, you have to partner. And I want to also urge the government, the policy makers, that their number one focus should be to build this ecosystem for circularity. That's exactly where the maximum value for the buck on circularity we can generate as an industry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shibu. So if there's anyone here from the cement sector, you always tell me that at least a quarter of the world's problems can be solved in your kilns. You guys do a great job. But what we've heard today is that circularity is so much more than that. A big thanks to Amit Ji for the way that Niti Aayog is stewarding India's transition to a more circular economy. Really appreciate Narayan, Rajagopal, and Shibu for these innovative approaches to business. And thanks to Nandini for putting this panel together. I'm going to finish with two shameless plugs. If you want to measure the circularity of your products and identify opportunities for attaining more value, please use the Circular Transition Indicators. One of India's largest automotive companies has written its entire circularity strategy on the basis of it. ASUS out of Taipei doubled from 35 to 70% the circular content in their notebooks. It's got applications in textiles, built environment, and so on. So if you look at the wbcsd.org Circular Transition Indicators, I promise you it will help you. It's a free resource. The second plug, I mentioned earlier that we're going to launch the global circularity protocol. Like the GHG protocol, the idea is to create one common framework to measure and disclose circularity. And it's crucial that that becomes as credible and globally adopted a standard as the GHGP. So if you're in an Indian business and you want to be part of making sure that that standard is inclusive and reflective and relevant in South Asia, then please get in touch with me and we'd be happy to have you as part of the leadership group testing that protocol and making sure that it's fit for purpose. Thank you very much. That's the end of the session.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that enriching dialogue, we conclude this session. Now, I request all the speakers to kindly gather for the group photo. Now, I request Mr. Joe to present the token of gratitude to the speakers, please. I also request Nandini ma'am to present the token of gratitude to our moderator, Mr. Joe.
Can I squeeze in, please? Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.